Singing became like I say, it was not only a motivator, but it was used as an organizing tool. And at the time when you had all black schools and the schools, the churches, everywhere you had music. And we used that in the movement as a powerful tool.
You are listening to The Wisdom Project, a podcast produced by the Louis B. Nunn Center for Oral History in the University of Kentucky Libraries.
My name is Doug Boyd, director of the Louis B. Nunn Center for Oral History in the University of Kentucky Libraries. When we look back on the history of the civil rights movement in the United States, particularly the organized effort to end legal segregation, resistance took on many forms. There were countless personal acts of resistance, most of which did not make the historical record. And there were collective acts of resistance, many of which became iconic symbols of the movement. There were large and small marches, ranging from the March on Washington to the 1964 March on Frankfort here in Kentucky, led by Martin Luther King. There were major boycotts, such as the Montgomery bus boycott. There were sit-ins, such as the sit-ins at the Woolworth in Greensboro, North Carolina. And there were major organized campaigns, for example, Freedom Summer. When looking back at collective forms of resistance and protest during the civil rights movement, people often marched together in protest. They often sat together in protest. They often held hands. Sometimes they even prayed together in protest. But something that seemed to be a common thread throughout all the various forms of collective protest and resistance was the music. People sang together. This episode of The Wisdom Project features the Nunn Center's oral history interview with Charles Neblett, who was interviewed for our Kentucky Civil Rights Hall of Fame Oral History Project. As a member of the Freedom Singers, Charles Neblett performed all over the country. The Freedom Singers performed at the 1963 March on Washington. They performed in churches and schools. They performed in the North. They performed in the South. They performed in large and small concert venues. In his oral history interview, Charles Neblett even talks about singing in jail.
We would always sing. We would always sing in jail. We would sing in jail and pray and sing, and we'd have bands in jail. We had guys playing the drums, and had trumpets and everything. We made music in jail. And you had to do that really to keep up, you know.
To keep your spirits up?
To keep your spirit up. And we would do all kinds of, and we would tell stories and so forth. And that's what we'd have to do, we'd do in jail. And the thing is, when the jailers and the sheriff, when they heard you doing this kind of thing, it really upset them. And some of them actually enjoyed the music. They come up there and wanted to hear, you know, what these kids are doing. And that, and then some of them were mad and would tell you got to stop at praying and singing. And they would come up with things like, if you don't stop it, we're going to take your mattresses. And we keep on singing. You got to take them off. You got to keep on singing. So you had to resist everything you had to resist. And then they said they were going to take your matches, all the matches. You got it. Boom. And then when they said they're going to take your toothbrush, I don't know what it is about a toothbrush. But there's something special about a toothbrush if you're in jail. So everybody kind of hesitated. Now, wait a minute, you going to take my toothbrush? And then everybody started throwing them out there. And you just keep on doing what you're doing. And you just incorporate with them. And that and everybody was together. And I guess it's, again, because we were young, very young, and that we just wouldn't do it. So we would do all kind of things to keep our spirits up.
For Charles Neblett and the Freedom Singers, music became a powerful form of protest and resistance. Charles Neblett was born in Tennessee near the Kentucky border. His family lived on both sides of the border at various times. Later, his family moved to Cairo, Illinois. As he describes in his interview, he'd always been resistant to segregation, even as a small child, purposely walking into a white restaurant, for example. But his resistance to segregation intensified in 1955. First, it was the lynching of Emmett Till.
Around what age were you when your family left Tennessee to go to Illinois?
I was about 13, 14 years old. And I remember at that time when the Emmett Till was murdered, and we were the same age. And when I heard about it and I saw those pictures that they had in Jet and Ebony magazine of his body, and but what really took the case was when they finally brought this to trial and they acquitted the murderers. And the next day or so, I think it was Life magazine, and one of those magazines interviewed those guys, and they admitted what they did and how they did it and the whole thing. So really, it just told me that I didn't count in this country, that they could do anything they wanted to me. The Constitution, no law that they had that was going to be in my favor, on my side. In fact, they could make any law they wanted to as it related to me. And I took it very personal. I was just sick. I was really, really sick. I didn't know what to do, but I knew that I still wasn't going, something going to happen.
Later that year, the Montgomery bus boycott focused him on action.
That's when Rosa Parks and Dr. King started the bus boycott down in Alabama. And when I saw those black men and women standing up to this system, it's like I got religion. It's just like it just lifted off of me. I said, it's on, it's on, it's on. I saw black men and black women doing something, standing up to this system, and I just couldn't wait to really get involved in that process. So that was part of my motivation in terms of really getting involved in the civil rights movement.
Neblett attended Southern Illinois University, and it was as a college student that he launched his more formal career as an organizer and an activist, taking on segregation on campus. He then went to Mississippi to work for the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, otherwise known as SNCC.
And they came through and they wanted me to work with SNCC, be a field secretary, to get on staff of SNCC.
And what does a field secretary mean?
Well, you're an organizer.
Okay.
An organizer for the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and they wanted me to go to Mississippi to work with Bob Moses, who was the director there. And everybody told the Student Nonviolent Coordinating SNCC said, don't go to Mississippi. And NAACP said, y'all crazy. And in fact, SCLC, Dr. King said, no, listen, you guys are gonna get killed down there. I mean, that's Mississippi. So we said, if we could break Mississippi, the rest of the South would be a cakewalk. And we decided to really put on a voter registration campaign and organize Mississippi around voting.
Inspired by the role of music in a desegregation campaign in Albany, Georgia in 1962, folk singer Pete Seeger suggested an idea to James Foreman that a musical group could be deployed to raise awareness and money on behalf of SNCC. Eventually, the idea made its way to Cordell Reagan, and the idea for the Freedom Singers was born. At this point in life, Neblett was an activist, and Neblett was a talented musician, but it was not until his involvement with SNCC when these two passions more formally converged.
Well, the Freedom Singers, had a guy named, well, what you had a lot of song leaders throughout the South. I mean, people who led songs. I mean, in the churches, on the picket lines, and jails and so forth. You had people who...
On the what?
In the jails, who really led songs. I mean, they were song leaders. And so they had a guy named Cordell Reagan, who, he was a song leader also, that I had met him when I was working in Cairo, and we'd done some singing in Cairo, Illinois, and I'd written a couple of songs. And when SNCC decided to, along with Cordell, Jim Foreman, Pete Seeger, were saying that what you really need to do is put together a group of singers, these song leaders, to take the message throughout the North in song, because a lot of this music was written about incidents and things that was happening in the South. And he said you could do for the movement the same thing that the Fifth Jubilee Singers did for Fisk. So what they wanted was a group not only to sing and tell the story of what was going on in the South, but use them not only that, but as an organizing tool.
And although he was passionate about both activism and music, Neblett was actually torn about channeling his activism toward his music.
Yeah, it was Cordell, and that he contacted me and said, would I want to do something like this? I was in Mississippi at that time. And so I'd rather be here. I'm in the heat of it here. Hey, this is where I want to be. And Bob Moses, who was the project director, he sat down and explained to me that certain things were important. And one is not necessarily more important than the other. And that that was something that would be very important to the movement, a group like that. And he encouraged me to think about it.
In 1962, the Freedom Singers were formed. The members included the founder Cordell Reagan, Bernice Johnson, Rutha Harris, and Charles Neblett. The group was formed specifically to harness the emotional power of music to raise awareness and money for SNCC. They toured nationally in over 40 cities in just their first year, including a performance at the 1963 March on Washington. When talking about the origins of the Freedom Singers, Neblett referred to some of the song leaders. There emerged from this time a repertoire of songs that became anthems of the civil rights movement. Songs like We Shall Overcome, This Little Light of Mine, Hold On, which was otherwise known as Keep Your Eyes on the Prize. Freedom songs, as they've been called, originated as gospel songs, spirituals, or hymns, but were then lyrically repurposed and tweaked to more specifically target the political needs of the moment. Through music, the Freedom Singers became a way to inspire, energize, unify, and mobilize. One of my favorite moments of this interview is when Charles Neblett tells a specific story about singing in a church, and he demonstrates firsthand how the power of music connects us and then transforms ordinary moments.
And a lot of times we'll be in churches, and when the sheriff would come in with his dogs in the church, you having a mass meeting, people start singing. And some kids start singing, I ain't scared of your dog, cause I want my freedom, I want my freedom, I want freedom, I ain't scared of your dog, cause I want my freedom, and I want my freedom now. Then a lot of people start singing. Then somebody said, I ain't scared of your gun, cause I want my freedom, and everybody starts singing, I want my freedom, ain't scared of your gun, cause I want my freedom, and I want my freedom now. And then the whole church just starts singing. And through that singing, it dispelled the fear. Everybody was telling about what they were going to do and what they wanted to do, what was on their mind. And then you see the fear transfer to the person with the dog and with the gun. Because they're confronted with all these people at one voice and in one mind and one purpose. And they don't know what to do. And they could get very, very confused.
This excerpt is an incredible example of the powerful role that music can play in protest movements. There's a long tradition of connecting music and protest, but I wanted to dig deeper and better understand why. So I brought in to the Nunn Center studio an expert to talk through it with me, Dr. Ron Penn, professor of musicology at the University of Kentucky. He had just recently retired when we did this interview. He was the director of the John Jacob Niles Center for American Music and the former coordinator of the Division of Musicology and Ethnomusicology. In addition to being wise, he's also a pretty incredible musician as well.
Out of many, one. There's a motto of some commonwealth near where we live. Mm-hmm. And that is what, that unanimity is the defining part of music. Social harmony is created by musical harmony. To go back even further than the civil rights, Kentucky played a very, very important role in the use of music as a force of social activism. People like Aunt Molly Jackson, Sarah Ogan Gunning, and the mining struggles in the 1920s, they took the music that belonged to families that had been held and cherished in community for generations and generations. And they took the tunes that people already knew, so no learning involved, and they recast the words to make them topical to the event. And so people could sing the music that they knew in community, be part of the community, bound together by the music, and then the words reflected the current situation in terms of mining protest. So I guess the power of it is community being made confirmed as a community by individual voices being bound together as one. It's really not about the music. I had an old-time banjo player that finally told me that. And I thought, what do you mean? Of course it's about the music. I've been making music and going to conservatory since I was 4 years old, and I always thought it was about the music. But the music that way is just a wall. And what music really is a window, a way of opening up yourself to another person, other people. It's really about the people. And the music is that vehicle that allows you to do it.
Music is about the people, and the music of Charles Neblett and the Freedom Singers brought many people together in song. Songs that played a large role in the success of the civil rights movement.
And singing became like I say, it was not only a motivator, but it was used as an organizing tool. And it's very traditional. It's a cultural thing that happens in the black community, especially in the churches, and at the time when you had all black schools and the schools, the churches, everywhere you had music. And that and we used that in the movement as a powerful tool. And the music was the songs.
Throughout this interview, Charles Neblett reflects on this transformative moment in history, but also on the people.
Like people like Gloria Richardson, like I said before, who ran that Cambridge movement. You have Robert Moses, who ran the Mississippi Project there. You have read about Jim Foreman, who was a great organizer and a person. Like Bob Moses, I lived around, I grew up around my heroes. I worked every day with my heroes, like Fannie Lou Hamer. All of these people were my heroes, and we worked together.
Eventually, Charles and his wife Marvinia moved to Russellville, Kentucky, where he continued to organize and be active. He was elected the first African-American magistrate of Logan County. He was inducted into the Kentucky Civil Rights Hall of Fame in 2010. And in 2014, Neblett and other members of the Freedom Singers sang for President Obama. While working on this episode yesterday, I pulled the 1997 double CD reissue of Voices of the Civil Rights Movement, Black American Freedom Songs 1960 to 1966 on Smithsonian's Folkways Records. It was compiled and produced by Bernice Johnson Reagan. There are several songs on this album by the Freedom Singers, also by Fannie Lou Hamer, and many, many others. And the songs are an incredible record. I think as a society, we should sing together far more often than we do. The Kentucky Civil Rights Hall of Fame Oral History Project is a partnership between the Nunn Center, the University of Kentucky's Office of Community Engagement, and the Kentucky Commission on Human Rights. And the project continues to interview inductees to the Hall of Fame. If you're interested, the interviews in this project are all available online and searchable using our super cool search system called OHMS. They're available at www.KentuckyOralHistory.org. This episode was co-produced by me, Doug Boyd, and Nunn Center student Hannah Jones. You can subscribe to this podcast via iTunes or on most of your other podcasting platforms. If you like what you hear, leave us a review. The music was written and recorded by me, Doug Boyd. You can connect with the Nunn Center on our website at libraries.uky.edu/nunncenter, or on Facebook, or on our blog at nunncenter.org. You can follow us on Twitter at nunncenter, Or you can follow me on Twitter at Douglas A. Boyd. Stay tuned for the next episode of The Wisdom Project.